Did you look at anything?
Yeah, because we have to.
Yeah. And she had a very panicked expression on her face.
She said something during that time. There was gas. It's a very important question.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody's gonna ask.
Yeah. There's one of those words. There. It's the
so did they just know right off that they had trouble?
Today? Oh no, I'm just in there. I'm sure it's a surprise. So, yeah, until they start to see that.
Am I going to do that? No, you can count on it. So do you feel like you're using it? You've lived with something.
Yeah, I love you. They look Alright, maybe. The part where so you're allowed to stand along the sides?
No, not so much.
I'm glad they came and got you because I was having
They do analysis. They look at sharp questions.
You're good.
Who knows? I'm new to the power.
Back when I was a young man,
So
of course,
this is, I was reading
You're taking
the journal.
I know when you.
He's there.
I'm joking.
And
And now, look at you now. What's becoming this? How do you put yourself in this?
Surprising you the way he sent me a press conference.
So you look at
They just sent it, and they said I might be interested. So I read it, and I said, well, please,
Oh, really? Yeah.
all that, I think I do join it.
It's just a still somebody. It's got the graphic.
It's not just art later, which was
How did you look in 2009?
I said,
Kirby-esque. That was when he was in Norfolk, right?
I'm not sure, I didn't watch the whole video, I was just waiting for the timer.
Boat went out there.
This is the way that I did this that I took up on. And the final path, where I hit the tower. Yeah, what it was.
He was a boxer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, because I guess they're part of political science and does that kind of stuff. Because they're not here. And so, you know, they want to do numbers. And so those things they can count, they don't count. And they can't count. So I count people. Because it's a back and forth, so I count people. Although I certainly on that one Biden had where he went for an hour and 57. Oh, yeah. That one I
don't take it.
That's how long you been? When did Goyle start? After you, really? There was a woman who worked through research, spotted the White House when I started, like in 1999. And she was, it was hard to know. She went back to the she was like hello?
Wow, that's
whatever conversations, because some of them you could say,
I remember her.
Anderson could voice the conversation. That's more important.
I was at the White House. Go back and famous photographs
Well, that's, you know, it's really one thing, and then, you know, when they started implementing
No, not
he works at a shop.
with those interviews, I classify them as interviews, because over the years, you can see how interviews, solutions, what is an interview changes over time. So I wanted, instead of just, I think exactly the same things count, same thing at the press conferences or different days. So how does it change over time?
Conversations as part of the interviews. It's like subset, probably just
Of course,
That's what he said to me.
That's true.
So, yeah, I'll go through any actual stuff.
Well, we might end up with the other way, right? Charismatic answer. How the Trump whoever settled on the questions before. Yeah, I'm like looking in the bottom of the cup. Yeah,
That's good now that she's, when she becomes a,
I know Tom the Frank, experience, have some experience.
Secret Service. That's what we did say. But he said he was good.
Unflappable.
I thought he was good. Where responsive.
He just never could be converged or hitting the ass out of experience. Somebody takes
For sure. Is it illegal?
never made himself
They didn't send you anything, John?
Yeah, it was,
They didn't send you hair.
It's something. It's a very large call.
nice person. Oh, they're making a lot of money.
Communications, we get scared. It must be some kind of system. They would say, woman who was nuts, and she made into the marriage.
So that's that. Okay, that's sharp entry.
She had a child,
That's not so bad.
and then when the child, she killed.
You can also sit down until someone takes tea.
That's your score? That's your score.
Any problem? Oh, you can see it. Okay.
How are you? How'd you get?
Yes, I don't want to like go. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Stars. I didn't look though. I was in Denmark. Doing an actual part. But we, after the debate, until, so we're gonna take it back, you know, so I go back up. That's what they.
Hey there. How you doing?
Yeah, you guys show up. Yeah, no, it's pretty
So many different kinds of protections, and you're dealing with your own Yeah, but he can sign up to that.
Started right.
Hey there, how you doing?
Good. Trying to get all this before she come.
You did get to see him go on the road. It does. Yeah, so I'm glad you're yeah, no, there's no Tuesday. Yeah, for Trump.
The press briefing will begin in 2 minutes. The press briefing will begin in 2 minutes.
That's all right. Let me step out. It's so mean. You heard it just announced 2 minutes long, right? So like, send that information to your man and sell it. Any choice. Just right there where it might take a lot. Because it's my cool day. Nothing ever happens on my cool day. Until someone
Exactly. To say, yeah.
Yeah.
hurry up.
Sure.
Not the second way.
Yeah, I never did actually. I'm just really tired today.
Sorry, that's before. It is me.
How are you? Good. Mike's on the chair. You're going, Kelly. How are you?
Cinnamon. Big red. Big red. Big red. That one. What's it? Hot tamales. Yeah, big red is roses. Like cinnamon, you know? Yeah. Yes. It's cute.
Oh, now I better.
I'll take it.
Don't worry about that. Good.
Good afternoon, everybody. So many jokes. But,
No, it's just you and Jackie are matched.
oh, okay, Jackie, all right, got the memo. So I want to start by saying that today is the Biden-Harris administration 500th briefing. Yay. I know you guys are excited. And then from now until the end of our term, we will do 500 more. I'm just kidding. Can you imagine? Anyway, guys, all kidding aside. So we've shared a lot of moments together and important exchanges. We are proud to be a White House that understands the importance of the role you all play. As President Biden has said, a free press is a pillar of our democracy. And so really happy to do this exercise with you almost every day from here, from this podium behind this lectern. And really, the freedom of the press is so incredibly important. And I think what we do almost every day shines a light to the world of how democracy works. And so thank you all for participating in that. And we appreciate the journalistic work that you all do. Today, the Senate took a major bipartisan step forward in making our kids safer online as our nation grapples with an unprecedented youth mental health crisis. There is undeniable evidence that social media and other online platforms have contributed to it, As the president said today in his statement, our children are subjected to a wild west online with virtually no limits of regulation, and it's past time to address that. It's exactly why he has made tackling the mental health crisis a key priority of this unity agenda for the nation. It's an issue that cuts across politics and affects red states and blue states, and it's why the administration has invested historic resources, launched new tools to ensure people can get the help they need, and has consistently called on Congress to work together in a bipartisan way on solutions. This bill does what the president called for in his first State of the Union address. It strengthens privacy protections, bans targeted advertising to children, and demands tech companies stop collecting personal data on our children. As the president said, our kids have been waiting too long for the safety and privacy protections they deserve, and which this bill provides. And he is pleased with the overwhelming bipartisan vote in the Senate and encourages the House to send this bill to his desk for his signature without delay. We continue to pray for the thousands of Americans under mandatory evacuations orders as wildfires continues to devastate communities across the western United States. The president has been briefed on the fires, including the Park Fire in California and the fires in Oregon. As of July 30th, over 7,000 federal personnel from the U.S. Forest Service and the Department of the Interior are on the ground across California and the Pacific Northwest, helping fight the blaze and keep people safe, including more than 620 personnel assigned to both the Park and Boreal fires in California. Numerous firefighting air tankers are flying fire suppression missions as conditions allow, and the Department of Defense has mobilized 4 of its C-130 modular airborne firefighting systems to support fire suppression efforts. DoD has also begun training National Guard troops should they be requested by governors to assist with fire suppression. And they are supporting California State National Guard operators' early and rapid detection of new fire starts. Additionally, FEMA has issued several fire management assistance grants to help reimburse states for firefighting costs. As always, we stand ready to provide further support as needed. Today, the 59th anniversary of Medicare and Medicaid, 2 programs that have given tens of millions of Americans the security and dignity of affordable health care coverage. Nearly 140 million Americans benefit from these programs, yet still Republicans in Congress have proposed budget cuts and slashes to these critical programs and endorse extreme policies of Project 2025 that would slash Medicaid funding and cut Medicare benefits like the president's Medicare drug price negotiation program. The contrast is clear. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to protecting and strengthening these programs, like making sure children and pregnant women covered by Medicaid have coverage for a full year. And we are committed to making health care more affordable and accessible for all, including the 1 million people newly covered under the ACA's Medicaid expansion since the president and vice president took over. Now think about the Inflation Reduction Act and what that does. It allows Medicare to negotiate lower prices on prescription drugs, caps out-of-pocket drug costs at $2,000 per year, saving Medicare beneficiaries thousands of dollars annually, and provides Medicaid and Medicare beneficiaries with free vaccines. And under President Biden and Vice President Harris, more people have health insurance than ever before. So today, we recognize the anniversary of Medicare and Medicaid. We affirm our commitment to build on this program, protect access to these programs from Republican elected officials, extreme attacks. With that, I appreciate your patience. Colleen, what time did you get home last night? 1:45. Okay. All right. Let's do this.
It's been a rough morning.
And Matt, too. I see Matt back there.
And too. So can you give us an update on where the U.S. stands on the Venezuela elections? In particular, I know the president is speaking with President Lula, Brazil leader, but
just wondering if there's any progress on how the U.S. is trying to decide, what to do.
So a couple of things. I believed right before I walked out, a statement from the National Security Council spokes went out, so certainly refer you to that. But just to give you a little bit of what was in that statement, obviously the U.S. has been closely monitoring Venezuela's presidential election that took place on Sunday and the subsequent announcements by Venezuela's National Electoral Council. First, let me say that the U.S. applauds the Venezuelan people for their courage and commitment to democracy by participating in this election in the face of repression and adversity. So we continue to call on Venezuela's electoral authorities to release full, transparent, and detailed voting results, including by polling stations as well. This is especially critical given that there are clear signs that the election results announced by the Venezuela's National Electoral Council do not reflect the will of the Venezuelan people as it was expressed at the ballot box on July 28th. We are also reviewing other electoral data shared by civil society organizations and the reports of international election monitors. The United States stands on the side of the democratic aspirations of the Venezuelan people, including supporting their right to express their views freely and without reprisal. So that is where we stand. And again, we're just going to not get ahead of that, but we've been very clear about the election results.
Can you help us understand a little bit about what the president was talking about last night? He was asked when he'd go campaign for Vice President Harris, and he said, well, I did today. I was wondering if there was yesterday, was there a campaign element to yesterday? Was he sort of talking broadly? I just wonder if you could help us.
So, as you know, the president gave a little. Is this when we came back at 1:15 a.m. and 1:15 a.m. on the South Lawn? The president took a couple of your colleagues' questions. I think he was. I did not ask him about that particular answer. My guess is he was speaking more broadly. Look. At the end of the day, I'm not going to speak for the campaign, not going to speak to the president's campaigning schedule. That is something for the campaign to speak to. But they are partners in this administration, the president and the vice president. As you know, we announced SCOTUS reform at LBJ Library just yesterday in Austin, and that was an important moment. That was an important moment to talk about where we are today. And the president met the moment talking about how no one is above the law here and how important the rule of law. I just started the top of the briefing talking about how it's so important to have the freedom of the press, right? And how we've had this is the 500th briefing. It is also important for our democracy. And so, obviously, the president and the vice president were partners in making that announcement in the sense of how they were going to move forward, the three things that he laid out on what reform looks like for this administration. As it relates to the campaign, don't have anything specific to share, but this is certainly the Biden-Harris administration, and everything that we have done the past 3.5 years, we want to continue to do moving forward and continue to work on behalf of the American people.
Okay. Thanks, Karine. Last night, the president said he's been talking to the vice president about her potential running mate. Could you just explain how often they've been talking to each other and when's the last time they spoke?
So I'm going to be super careful, not going to speak to the running mate or anything like that. I'm not going to go beyond what the president shared. What I can say is and I have said this before, the president and the vice president talk regularly. They actually spoke about a day or two ago. They stay in touch, and that's going to continue as they not just because obviously the vice president is running, but that's going to continue because, as I said, she's a critical partner in what they do, but they do speak regularly, and I can assure you.
Is there any color you could add about the kind of conversations, if there's, counseling, the president, advice he's been sharing with his vice president?
So I'll say this. The president has been in the public service, as you know, for more than 54 years. As a senator, as vice president, he had the role, as you all know, for 8 years as vice president, and now he is president for 3.5 years and six more months of his term. And I think as a leader of the Democratic Party as well, I think he always offers up advice, any type of little bit of wisdom that he has with experience on these multiple fronts that he's been able to lead this country. And so, I think that is certainly a role that he plays as well with the vice president. I'm not going to speak to the campaign, but certainly when the vice president became vice president herself, he offered his advice, his opinion, and also I would say was a mentor to her, but certainly not going to go beyond that.
And where's the president when it comes to picking a new Secret Service director? Is this a very short list? Is he really broadening this search?
Yeah, I think I was asked this question yesterday or very recently. Look, the president understands how important it is to fulfill this role, to have someone who's experienced. And so he's taking this very seriously, like he does any other appointment that he makes within the administration. Don't have anything for you on timing, on timeline. We don't have a personal announcement for you today, but certainly the president's taking this very seriously. And when we have locked in someone ready to make that announcement, certainly you all will know about it. Go ahead. You like ruined the first roll.
What did I? I'm sorry. I apologize to you
Reuters.
and to everyone for that. Yes,
it's always Reuters. Last time it was Steve.
I take full blame for that.
But we love you anyway.
The Israeli strikes in Lebanon today. Do you view them as escalatory? Do you think they're an appropriate response to what we saw previously?
So obviously we are aware of the reports out there that the IDF just conducted a strike against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And I leave it to Israel to speak for their own military operations. I do not have an immediate comment as this just happened. Literally just happened a few minutes before I walked out. So I'm going to leave Israel to certainly IDF, as they have been doing, to respond to this, and just don't have an immediate comment at this time.
And then just to follow up on Colleen's question earlier, the Lula call today, is there...
I'm sorry, Karine, I didn't touch on that.
Is there any expectation that there's going to be some prep as far as sanctions are concerned, or what is the Venezuela content of that?
Oh, okay, so let me just say, and I think we shared this with all of you, that the president was going to be speaking with the president of Brazil, and so they're going to discuss a number of issues, and like we normally do, we will certainly have a readout for all of you. So look, we are, as it relates to Venezuela, we are obviously in the process of evaluating the Maduro and his representatives due next, and we will respond accordingly. And so while I have nothing to announce today as it relates to sanctions or moving forward, we will continue to assess our calibrated sanctions policy towards Venezuela in light of overall U.S. interest, the actions and non-actions that are taken by Maduro and his representatives, and the overall direction of our broader U.S. Bilateral engagement with Venezuela. And so, again, don't want to get ahead of where we are at this time. Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Karine. Just going back to Israel, if I may, Kirby said yesterday that fears of an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah were exaggerated. Is that still the White House's assessment after today's strike?
So we do not believe that an all-out war is inevitable. That is not something that we believe, and we believe that it can still be avoided. This is a president, you've watched him the last 3.5 years, he believes in diplomacy, diplomatic solutions, especially as we're talking in this moment along the blue line, that is true as well. And so, and that will end these attacks if we have some diplomatic kind of solution from Hezbollah once and for all, and allow Israel and Lebanese citizens on both sides of the border to return to their homes and live in safety. And that's what we want to see. So that's what we believe. There's a diplomatic solution here, and that's what we're trying to get to.
And will the White House be reaching out again to Israel in the wake of this strike to...
So, look, I don't have any, again, immediate reactions to this or immediate comments from us on this. We regularly talk to our counterparts here, regularly talk to our Israeli counterparts, our government, our counterparts there, and so that will continue. That is a regular daily conversation. I just want to be really mindful. I just don't have an immediate comment to today. Kadwisha.
Thanks, Karine. So what reason do you and the president have to believe that there is a diplomatic solution here?
Because we have to continue to be optimistic here. I think it's important to have a diplomatic solution. We do not want to see an escalation. We do not want to see an all-out war. those conversations happened, the diplomatic conversations. Obviously, I'm not going to get into private discussions from here, but it is important. It is important for the people of Israel. It's important for the Lebanese people to live in safety, to get back to their homes, and that's what we want to see.
And then following up on something else the president said yesterday when he was asked about Supreme Court reform.
Yes.
What did he mean when he said that Speaker Johnson is dead on arrival?
So look, he actually addressed this right in his speech, in his remarks. Yesterday he went right to it and talked about how his idea basically was dead on arrival, the Speaker's idea. He actually talked about it, and he said what the Speaker, he reiterated what the Speaker said about the SCOTUS reforms announcement, and then he said that his idea was dead on arrival. So I would just refer you to the President himself and how he addressed this directly during his remarks when he was at LBJ Library.
So he misspoke?
I don't think he misspoke. I think he cleared what he meant specifically so people understood. I would not say he misspoke. I think
initially when he said, I think that's what he is.
Look, let's be very clear. He spoke while he landed, after we landed, getting off the Air Force One, and he gets shouted questions, and he responded. He just wanted to be really clear what he meant by dead on arrival. You've been there. You know how it happens. It goes back and forth. People can't really hear him sometimes. He can't hear you all, and that is something he wanted to make sure he was clear on his statement. But that was always his intent when he answered that question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karine. Is this Supreme Court proposal just an election year gambit?
I will say this. I think if you read the Washington Post op-ed that the president put out yesterday, if you listen to his speech, he was reacting to what SCOTUS has been doing over the past, not just past couple of weeks, but certainly the last 2 years, starting from Dobbs and so many other important decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court. The Dobbs decision certainly was something that we talked about just 2 years ago, and he had a commission to take a look at the Supreme Court. He certainly appreciated the commission and what they did and the work that they've done. But when you have, a Supreme Court, and the president actually gave examples, right, of what the decision of immunity that they made recently, what that means for the president of the United States, and what we're seeing right now is not normal. And majority of Americans agree with us, right? What we're seeing that the Supreme Court is not normal. And the president spoke to that at length. He went to the LBJ Library because of the historic nature of that library, the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act, and there's so much here that's at stake, and so that's why he wanted to do this. This is about the right thing to do. This is about meeting the moment that we're in. This is about reacting to what the SCOTUS did. He said in his op-ed, American democracy is founded on the rule of law. No one, not the president, not the Supreme Court, are above the law. And in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling, for example, it grants presidents immunity for crimes committed in office and gut fundamental freedoms recognized for more than 50 years. And so he wanted to take action on that. And,
But why would he not then read in top Democrats, including the Senate Judiciary Chair, about this effort?
Here's the thing. Majority of Americans want to see this. They want to see some form of reform. And the president, legal experts and Republican elected officials have voiced support, for example, term limits, which was part of what the president laid out yesterday. For example, last year, a bipartisan group of legal experts, including retired judges and Charles Fried, Ronald Reagan's Solicitor General, endorsed term limits for the Supreme Court. Stephen Calabrese, the chairman of the Federalist Society, who served in the administrations of Presidents Reagan and George H.W. Bush, he also endorsed term limits. You had Marco Rubio, a senator right now, right, a current senator, endorse this as well, along with other congressional Republicans. So there is bipartisan support for this.
I'm trying to understand how we got to this in the last week, because you brought up the president's commission. His commission also found on term limits that a statutory change for term limits, for instance, would be inherently unstable, underscored constitutional doubts said that the composition would generate greater uncertainty and distress. The president himself, on the campaign trail in 2020, said about term limits, presidents come and go, Supreme Court justices stay for generations. I'm not trying to change that at all. It was 2 different days he spoke to this. So how did we get there?
First of all, he appreciates the commission, appreciates the work that they've done. Their job was to give the president some thoughts and ideas, and obviously the president makes the final decision on how he wants to move forward. We have to look at what the Supreme Courts have done. Wait.
That was 2021.
You gotta let me answer the question. I'm not done. Let me finish the question. In the past several weeks, the actions that the Supreme Court has taken in undermining democracy and the rule of law, that's important. The president felt he needed to address this. Remember, we were supposed to go to LBJ Library 2 weeks ago. And we went 2 weeks ago, this past Monday, yesterday. And so the president still wanted to move forward, still wanted to make sure he addressed this important issue. I mean, just look at what the Supreme Court has done these past few weeks.
Endorsing eliminating the filibuster then.
I mean, look. He laid out the 3 ways that he wants to move forward. We're going to have hopefully a healthy debate with Congress on what this is going to look like. This is going to be legislation that we want to move forward with. And I will say this, one of the reasons the president ran in 2020 was because of what he saw in Charlottesville, was because of the fear of, wanting to make sure that we protect the soul of our nation. That was part of it. And just look at what's happened, the last several years and the actions that the Supreme Court has taken. I mean, this is a president that was on the Judiciary Committee for almost the 36 years that he was president, right? If you think...
Yes, on the filibuster?
No, I actually answered this. I said, we're going to have a healthy debate with Congress on what this is going to look like. The president laid out the 3 ways that he sees moving forward. There's not going to go beyond those 3 measures that he's laid out, but we're going to have a healthy debate, and that's what's important here.
Filibuster's no question.
I just said we are going to...
filibuster.
We welcome a healthy debate on how to move forward. He put forth three ways to move forward on this, on really dealing with SCOTUS reform, and I just laid out some conservative legal experts who agree with us, at least on the term limits. They've been very clear as well. Okay.
Former President Trump did an interview where he said that maybe being called a threat to democracy was a cause of his being shot. How would the president respond to that?
What I will say is the president has always been very clear when it comes to violent political rhetoric. There's no place here in this country, in our nation for it. He's always spoken about that. He's spoken about that for the past, the past several years throughout his career. And, right after the assassination attempt, the president said, he even made an address in the Oval Office and talked about lowering the temperature. He talked about getting to the bottom of this, having an independent investigation, and how important it was to do just that. And I talked about Charlottesville. We saw how the president spoke against January 6th. The day that, and I remember this, the day that January 6th happened in 2021, the president was then president-elect. He was supposed to talk about the economy. He took that opportunity to denounce what happened. 2,000 people went to the Capitol. A mob went to the Capitol. Law enforcement officers were harmed. Some of them lost their lives afterwards. And he condemned that. He condemned the political violence. And they were doing that because they were trying to overturn free and fair elections. When Paul Pelosi was attacked by a hammer, the president also spoke out about violent political rhetoric and where we will, what happened, how horrific that was. And violence has no place in this country. So if anything, this is a president has been constantly and proactively called out on all Americans to come together and oppose political violence, regardless of our views.
He's had a little more than a week now to contemplate his change in status, not being a candidate, but being the sitting president. Has he described to you ways he wants to use the time perhaps differently since he doesn't have the campaign obligation?
Yeah, I think, look, we have six more months left. And the president is certainly very much thinking through what that's going to look like as far as delivering for the American people. His job doesn't stop, it continues. We've had an unprecedented record for 3.5 years on things that we were able to accomplish, whether it's the economy, being the strongest, having the strongest economy in the world, leading the world, whether it is foreign policy, making sure that we are, again, rebuilding those relationships with our partners and allies. That's something that he's been able to do. You know, healthcare, I just talked about Medicaid and Medicare at the top. There are many ways that the president wants to continue. The Supreme Court reform announcement that he made was also really important. Majority of the Americans care about that. You will hear more from this president. He will articulate what the next 180 days or so or less looks like. He is going to take this very seriously.
You see less travel. Often it's an official event and campaign coinciding. So would he be based here more, do you anticipate?
So look, I think Matt was asking me this question in the gaggle yesterday, recalibrating. And yes, there's a little bit of recalibrating here, right? And that is the honest truth. So we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. The president is thinking about this in the way that he does, right? On behalf of the American people, putting them first. And so we'll have certainly more to share. Obviously, the president enjoys being out there, talking directly to the American people. I think that's one of the ways that we are more effective, right, when the president gets out there. Can't speak to the campaign. That's something that the campaign can speak to. But the president wants to get out there. He wants to speak directly to the American people. He wants to continue to deliver. And you will hear him articulate that more, I will predict in the short order.
We saw the president meet briefly with Congressman Doggett of Texas on the tarmac yesterday. I wondered if he just had a readout of that conversation, given Doggett's status as the first Democrat to call for him to withdraw. And just broadly speaking, is the president's relationships with some of these members affected by them if they were among the 30 or so to call for the president to withdraw before his
I mean, you kind of answered that question yourself. President Doggett was there on the tarmac, reading the president. I'm not going to go into private conversations. That's something that I do and will do from here. We've done for the past 3.5 years, so we're going to continue with that. But I mean, I think you saw them greet each other. But I mean, this is a president, and I've said this many times. He believes in, reaching across the aisle, for example, and working with Republicans who say he can't get things done, right? This is a president who understands that the Democratic Party is big, and there are many, many thoughts, and that's what makes our party, I think, so unique and important, because we have different ideas, because we have different thoughts. And the president understands, they had their opinion. There were Democrats who had their opinion. He obviously had his. And he appreciated we were able to have an unprecedented historic record because of the relationships that he's had with these Democratic members. I don't think that will change.
Going back to the
Are
Venezuela.
you new to the?
Yes.
Oh.
Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie from Bloomberg. Nice to see you.
Thanks
Is this your first time in the briefing room?
Not my first time, but
Okay.
I'm asking a question.
Oh,
so
okay.
thank you for that.
All right, here we go.
Going back to the Venezuelan elections,
Sure.
is the president using the call with Lula as an intermediary to deal with the election results? And what kind of assurances is he looking for from his Brazilian counterpart about Maduro's promises to release?
So they're going to be, I believe, speaking shortly, if it hasn't started, with the president of Brazil. They're going to talk about a wide range of issues. Obviously, we'll have a readout. Don't want to get ahead of that conversation, ahead of that call. I think I have said before, and we have said here, that the world is watching. We're not going to get ahead of the process. I think you saw the statement from NSC spokes. You heard what I said at the top. And so, and I'll add, other leaders across the country has also called on a full and detailed tabulation votes to be released. And so we've expressed our concerns and not going to get ahead of the readout that's going to come out from the president after his conversation with the president of Brazil. But the world is watching, certainly.
Does the
administration have a reaction to the arrest of Venezuelan opposition figures?
Look, I'll say this, any political repression or violence against protesters or the opposition is obviously unacceptable. The United States supports the democratic aspirations of the Venezuelan people and their right to express their views freely and without reprisal. And so that's where I'll leave it there. Get April. I know, the mask threw me off.
Moving on.
Yes.
Karine, why is President Biden not going to the NABJ convention after originally thought, and is the Vice President going this week to the NABJ convention?
So the NABJ convention decision was done by the campaign, so I would have to refer you to the campaign on both of your questions about the president and the vice president, as obviously the president is no longer a candidate. So I'm assuming that played a role into it. As far as the vice president, you would have to ask the campaign about her.
This is something typically during an election year that presidential candidates do take part of. Is this something that is overshadowed because of recent controversies? I mean, is the White House paying attention to the recent controversy about Donald Trump going there tomorrow? And what, if you can tell us?
So look, I'm certainly not going to comment on the former president's campaign stops. That's a campaign stop for him. And the NABJ, they make their own decisions on guests, so certainly that's for them to speak to. What I can say more broadly about us and how we as an administration, taking away the campaign just as an administration, what we've done for the last 3.5 years, we appreciate the importance of speaking to all Americans, including African Americans, Black Americans as well. That's why we have always been very, very direct and very focused on speaking to both local and national Black-owned outlets. That is something that not just the president and the vice president has done. Many of his senior folks have done as well, senior White House officials. And so we understand the importance of Black Americans to hear directly from this administration, and we have done that. And not just Black Americans, but all Americans. And so that is certainly something that we will continue to do, and we take that very, very seriously. As far as the NABJ, that is something for them to speak to, and the campaigns to speak to directly. Again, Michael.
Karine, thank you. I want to talk about Israel and Gaza. The regional director for the World Food Programme said right now the biggest challenge is we don't have enough crossing points to bring the food in. We need road access, we need the Rafah crossing to reopen again, we need Kerem Shalom to work better, we need law and order. Did the president bring that up with Netanyahu in his meeting last week?
So look, I don't have anything more to read out to you from what we put out from our readout of their conversation. I will say this is why it is so important to get that hostage deal. This is obviously one of the main point of conversations that the president had with the prime minister. The president understands how important it is to get a ceasefire. He understands how important it is to continue to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. That is something that the United States has led in that effort, and so we want to see that. We want to see an influx of humanitarian aid. That's why we've been trying to do this by air, by sea, by land, and so conversations about the crossings, conversations on making sure trucks go through is certainly daily, regular conversations that our counterparts here have with the Israeli government, and will continue to do that. But it is incredibly important to get this ceasefire deal, and we've been working on this 24/7. And I'll say this, and we've said this before: the gaps have certainly narrowed, and that's important. But there's still some work to do, and we're going to get to that work and try to make sure we do everything that we can to get this done.
Is the U.S. worried that an increased Israeli focus on fighting in the north could lead to a worsening humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip?
I mean, look, we believe that there's no need for this to escalate right? We have said that. I said that at the top to answering to one of your colleagues answering a question. And look, we understand that the humanitarian situation is dire in Gaza. That's why the president, this administration has led in getting humanitarian aid in. That's why we're continuing to work on this hostage deal, get a ceasefire, and we're going to continue to do so. And it was obviously an important conversation that the president had with the prime minister.
Thank you, Karine. Two questions. The first is on those IDF strikes. I know that you said that the strikes just happened, so you can't comment specifically on those, but broader on the trajectory of this conflict. It's been the goal of the U.S. not to have the war widen since October 7th, and President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu just sat down together last week. Was his team surprised by what's happened in recent days?
So again, I'm not going to get into immediate comment on the IDF strike. So that's not something I'm going to do at this time. And again, we speak to escalation, potential escalation, the questions I've gotten about all-out war, we do not believe that an all-out war is inevitable, and we believe that it can be avoided. And that's why it's important to get to a diplomatic solution here. And so,
did the president get any sense during that meeting last week that a diplomatic solution was within reach?
We want to work and focus on getting that diplomatic solution along the blue line, and that is important. We want to see these attacks from Hezbollah end, and for all and allow Israelis and also Lebanese citizens on both sides of the border to be able to return homes to their lives and to live in safety. And so that's what we want to be. That's what we want to be. And so diplomatic solution is the way that we want to see the direction of this. And we do not believe that an all-out war is inevitable here. But as it relates to the strikes that just occurred, I just don't have any immediate comment on this at this time.
And then on the personnel front, President Biden obviously himself served as the vice president for 8 years. He handpicked Kamala Harris for that role nearly 4 years ago. What level of input, if any, has he provided as she undergoes that same decision?
Look, he was asked this question directly, the president, at 1:15 a.m. on the South Lawn. He responded to it, so I'm going to let the president's word speak for itself. I don't have anything beyond that. Go ahead, Karen.
I'm going to try this, and knowing that you can't answer, but I'm going to ask you if you can answer it from the president's perspective, how he feels about the vice president's first week plus out on the campaign trail. What does he think about the fundraising she's done, the events she's done, and what he has seen so far?
I'll say this. Obviously, the president, and also being mindful about talking about an election, obviously the president endorsed Kamala Harris, the vice president, for a reason. He thought she would be ready on day one. This is someone who was a senator, who was an attorney general for the largest state in the country. She has been obviously a vice president for almost 4 years. She is immensely qualified, and the president, having been a senator and a vice president himself, understands what it takes, and he sees that in her. So I would say he's not surprised. And I'm going to leave it at that to not get myself in too much trouble.
Is he watching any of the Olympics? Is he taking in anything? I say that because my phone is blowing up. So what is
It's been great so far. The Olympics has been
sport?
so great. Look, the president and the first lady are certainly proudly cheering on Team USA. As you saw, the first lady traveled to, traveled to Paris to lead the delegation, the U.S. delegation, for the opening ceremonies, and cheered on Team USA. And you saw her out there being very supportive. And so the president certainly is proud of all the athletes competing on behalf of the U.S., on behalf of our nation, and he's going to continue to cheer them on.
Following up on that,
Did the president see the Last Supper controversy at the Olympics? Do you know? Did he see
I don't have anything.
The Last
I
Supper
appreciate the question. I
controversy?
just don't have anything to
Millions
share.
of Christians across the globe were offended by it. The president's Christian. Was he offended by it? But was the president offended by it?
I just answered your question.
Can I just ask him? Did he see it?
I don't have anything else to add.
Did he see it?
Thank you so much.
I have a couple of foreign policy questions, but just to follow up on
sure.
Jackie's question. If Supreme Court reform does not pass, and it seems unlikely under this Congress that it will. What does the president hope his effort will accomplish? Is it to get the American people used to the idea of the need of reform? Is it a message to Justice Roberts? What does he think this would lead to?
I will say majority of the American people support and want to see reform, right? They want to see this. This is where majority of Americans are. And I will say this, the president and the vice president believe that the rule of law is the foundation of our democracy. It is the foundation of our democracy, which is why the president took action yesterday, and he's calling on Congress to do the same. Now, what we welcome is a debate. As we've seen as many times as the president introduced legislation or some ideas on how the direction of a legislation that's important to the American people. We see a healthy debate. I listed out moments ago when I was having a back and forth with Jackie here, conservative legal experts who support, for example, term limits. And so I think that was important to note. Senator Marco Rubio, who I also mentioned, who's obviously a current senator in the US Senate, supports term limits. So there are ways that we can work together. I'm not going to get into what that legislation is going to look like. We're going to have a healthy debate. We think that's important. But we're talking about the rule of law here. We're talking about the rule of law, which is the foundation of our democracy. The president is going to say something. The president is going to make sure that is protected, as he has done. That is one of the reasons he decided to run. That is one of the reasons of the work that we were able to do. 2022, the rule of law, democracy, was one of the top issues that Americans cared about.
Would it also be a message to Justice Roberts?
I'm not going to get into messages to the Chief Justice. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the right thing to do. We're talking about the right thing to do here.
And on the foreign policy side, there's reporting that North Korea could conduct another nuclear test to coincide with the U.S. election, the presidential election. How concerned is the administration about this? Is this a real threat? Do you have a message to Pyongyang?
I'm just not going to get into hypotheticals from here. What's your next question?
On today's sanctions on Iran that Treasury announced, individuals and entities related to its ballistic missiles and drones program. Can you speak about the timing? Today, the Iranian new president is being sworn in by the parliament.
So look, what I can say, this is something that the Department of Treasury did. They announced new sanctions, as you just said, targeting 5 individuals and 7 entities based in Iran, the PRC, Hong Kong, that have facilitated procurements behalf of Iran's military forces. The designated entities have been involved in procuring key components of Iran's ballistic missiles and UAV program. These sanctions are part of, you've heard us talk about sanctions before, especially in the last 3.5 years. They're part of our ongoing efforts to counter Iran's activities, including its arming of proxies in the Middle East and its enabling of Russia's war in Ukraine. You've heard talk about this. Again, this is part of announcements that ongoing efforts that we've had here in this administration, and that's how I would view it.
Nothing specific on the timing.
It's ongoing. This has been ongoing sanctions that we've had throughout this administration. Yeah. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Has the president met with leaders Schumer and Jeffries about legislative priorities for the remainder of this 6 months, as you discussed?
Yeah, don't have any meetings or conversation at this time to read out or lay out on conversations specifically on the next 6 months. But again, this is something that the president's taken very seriously. He wants to continue to deliver on behalf of the American people. That's what you're going to see him do in the next 6 months. He will articulate this on what this is going to look like specifically, what he's going to focus on. And I think what you saw yesterday was a clear indicator of that.
He'll be giving remarks at some point, sort of articulating the vision for the next 6 months. Any timeline on when that might
I don't have
happen?
any timeline. I said he will articulate that. We'll see what that looks like. But look, he wants to certainly, and I think this is a little bit of Kelly O's question to me, he certainly wants to get out there. He wants to continue to talk directly to the American people. And again, just bringing in my friend Matt Visor here, there is a recollaboration here. We're trying to see what that looks like, what that's going to look like, what he wants to focus on. And so just, give us a second. We have a lot to focus on. But I would also say, there's these historic pieces of legislation, whether it is whether it's the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, as we know, there are thousands of projects out there that we want to make sure that gets implemented. There's the Inflation Reduction Act. There's Medicare, who continues to negotiate with Big Pharma. We want to make sure that on medication, on drugs that are important, making sure that the prices go down. We're going to continue to do that. There's the Chips and Science Act, where that's going to bring investments into this country. We want to see those big pieces of legislation that obviously are now laws, acts, that we want to see implemented. And so that's always been a priority of this president, and so that's certainly going to continue to be so. I know I keep. I know. I just like the second time. I know. I conjured you up to ask a question. I've called your name out many times today.
Since we're watching that recalibration in real time,
that's the word of the week.
Do you have a sense on what the president's doing today, like what his schedule is like today, or for the remainder of the week?
No, and I appreciate that question. I have something to share with all of you, and I said he's going to continue. The president's going to continue to work for the American people day in, day out. That does not change. It is extremely important to him to continue building on his accomplishments and finish the job. You saw him on the road yesterday for over 12 hours in Texas, and he spoke with reporters. I've been mentioning many times during this briefing at 1 o'clock, 1:15 in the morning, taking some questions. Look, he has a call with the president of Brazil today, which will have a readout, as I mentioned, a completed readout once we are done. Once he's done having that conversation, the president will receive his regular presidential daily briefing. He's going to do that this afternoon and meet with his national security team. And tomorrow, the president will be briefed on the implementation of important provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, and we will actually have more to come on that, so stay tuned. We'll have more on that later today. He will also receive a briefing from senior officials on the administration's new actions on ongoing work to crack down on drug trafficking, traffickers smuggling deadly drugs, including fentanyl, into the United States, and efforts to beat the global opioid epidemic. And I should have mentioned this before, as when I was asking about the vice president. He will indeed see the vice president tomorrow. He will have lunch with her tomorrow, as they regularly do. As I said, they stay in regular contact, as she is a critical partner for him in how he moves forward in this administration. All right. Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks, Karine. So the national debt crossed $35 trillion for the first time ever. The amount being added to the debt seems to be increasing at a growing rate. Today we talked with Fitch, and they told us that the credit rating agency, and they told us that large fiscal deficits and increasing debt burden were key factors to the downgrade that the U.S. had last year. Is the president worried about another downgrade because our spending is more than the money we're taking in?
Yeah, so let me just tick off a couple of things, if I may, and want to be super clear about this. The president signed a $1 trillion of deficit reduction into law, and his budget would lower the deficit by another $3 trillion by making billionaires and biggest corporations pay their fair share and cutting spending on special interests. That was an action that the president did. The prior administration increased the debt. Let's not forget what the prior administration did, by a record $8 trillion, and didn't sign a single law to reduce the debt deficit. And that's what we're dealing with right now. And on top of that, you have congressional Republicans that to continue to want to blow up the debt, again with $5 trillion more in Trump tax cuts, while making hardworking families, pay the price by cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Affordable Care Act. And we want to do the opposite, right? The president's economic agenda, we want to make sure that we put middle-class family first, hardworking families first, and congressional Americans want to give more tax cut to the rich, to the billionaires, to the corporations. So the president has taken action to try and lower the deficit, and Republicans want to balloon that. And $8 trillion from the last administration, and they did nothing to try to make sure that we lower the deficit.
So you're saying that we crossed $35 trillion because former President Trump's administration, I mean, that was 4 years ago, the debt keeps increasing.
Yeah.
At what point?
The fact is, $8 trillion was what the increase in debt was, what the last administration did, the Trump administration. They didn't put forth any type of legislation to counter that. They didn't. They just let the debt balloon by $8 trillion. That's what they. But that's what they did. The president. But what I.
For the last 3 years.
And what I'm saying to you is, like, we can't discount what happened in the last administration, and we can't discount what this president is trying to do to make sure that we address this. $1 trillion in deficit reduction into law and signed. And that would lower the deficit by another $3 trillion by making billionaires and the biggest corporations pay their fair share. Republicans are offering the opposite of that. So I think policy matters. What we've been able to get done matters. I'm not discounting what you're saying. I'm just saying the president is actually working to lower the deficit, and Republicans want to do the opposite. That is where we are when we think about the policy. That is where we are. And I think that matters as well. I know I have to get going. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Karine. In the beginning, you mentioned the importance of press freedom, like the case of Evan Gershkowitz, Austin Tice, Yu Yudong. We see that the press freedom itself is extremely important issue worldwide. In the case of Mongolia, considering the fact that the foreign minister of Mongolia visited just 7 days ago, it seems like there's an increased fear of the degradation of press freedom within the country. In the case of Universitet Naran, Mungpar Cholendorj, it is a big concern. With the increase of U.S.-Mongolia relations in the upcoming future, is the issue of press freedom going to be mentioned a lot more into the conversation? And then also at the same time, given the fact that it seems the Kremlin or Beijing influence has reached into the country, would this be a point of concern for the Biden administration?
I think the last point, we've spoken to that at length about certainly our concerns. Look, when it comes to the freedom of the press, this is something that the president is never afraid to talk about with any world leaders or leaders more broadly. And that is something that he has done. He's had those conversations. He certainly has said it publicly, and what he says publicly, he certainly says privately. Not going to get into specifics of conversations of that particular relationship, but he understands. He understands the importance of the freedom of the press. It is important to have that. It is part of our democracy. We've been talking, kind of the theme of this briefing has been democracy, right? And being able to lead on that as a country, and that's what we've been doing here, and we're going to continue to do that. And again, he's going to have those conversations. He's going to say what we're saying publicly, certainly privately as well. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.